Hello, everyone. Welcome to class for tonight. Glad to have you here. Coming to you live from a very rainy residence inn in Folsom, California. Always something fun and interesting. My wife says it hadn't started raining yet when I talked to her a couple hours ago. I don't know if it's raining in Fresno yet, but nonetheless. All right, so we are here for class. Let's do this quick here. Give me 2 seconds. I'm just going to send a quick text. Sorry about that. My dad's been in and out of the hospital, so I'm texting my brother's calling me. So I got to text. He texted me or calling me. I got to make sure. Anyway. Okay, so have class tonight. We're going through. Let's take a look at what we have. Let me see what we have here. Let's get into our class for this evening. Pull this down here and close that. Look at our assignments. Today is November 30th. We should have turned in, today's November 13th. So our assessment creation assignments due next week. And then just the last two, final project presentation. So we should have everything else turned in other than that. Any questions about what's due? Anything along those lines that you guys have questions about? Happy to answer if you have them. Pretty embarrassed that I have this up on my thing. I was looking at it at work today. I have a granddaughter who's 5, and all my friends are saying these are the things that all the kids like right now. These little crazy Lulaboo or whatever I don't even know what the heck they are. So I sent it to my daughter and said, "What is this? And does my granddaughter want one of these for Christmas?" And she said, "It's the weirdest thing. I have no idea what it is." So, and I did learn something today. To know if they're authentic, if they're real, they have to have 9 teeth. I don't know if you know that, but I learned that today, that if they're not fake, they have 9 teeth. So yeah, I was looking at that for I just was noticing my tabs, and I'm like, it's pretty embarrassing that you guys are seeing me with these Labubu or whatever they're called. That's what I've been looking at with my friends in one of my meetings. See, I'm trying to be that grandpa that spoils their granddaughter. You know what I'm saying? I want to come in ahead of the game and make sure I bring in the stuff that they're going to need for Christmas beforehand. She's only 5. My daughter's like, "Please don't get her that. That's like scary." So anyway, because I have a 5-year-old, and that means I have a 3-year-old as well, and that means that I have to get one for both of them. And just a 3-year-old dragging it around, that would probably not go over well. Anyway, Francisco, go for it. What's up?
I have a question. So the final project and the final presentation are the same thing?
It's not the same thing. You're going to do your final presentation on your final project.
Okay.
Yeah, so you're going to do a final presentation will be based upon your project. So you should give me a brief summary, 5 to 10 minutes, go through some of the elements that are most important. Again, we're doing it because presentations are something you need to practice and use, especially when you're presenting technical information. So that's what we want you to do. Okay, any other questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
On the assessment creation assignment, that's due a week from today.
Yep.
I think I need some help with the questions to ask or how to ask the questions. So my program evaluation, and I think my final project is going to be on this SST, Beyond SST program. That is a computer-based program for teachers to get students into the SST system and then be able to utilize that for inputting intervention, data, progress monitoring, all of that. The problem that I'm finding, which is really interesting after 28 years of teaching, is that teachers at my school are very confused about the baseline for a student to trigger an SST. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So in other words, like we have some kids in 3rd grade right now that don't know their letters or sounds, and we're all wondering like, how did this happen? And so my idea is to create a 5-question questionnaire for teachers to determine when should you use the Beyond SST program? How do you know when to put a kid into that system?
So that sounds great. I would not do anything that's quantitative. I would stick to a qualitative, open-ended question. You just understand what I'm saying? Because you're
Yeah.
not going to have anything that's going to be able to say when you get to 4 yeses, put them in an SST. There's just too many outside variables that go into why we would use an SST. But you could
Okay.
certainly do 3 to 5 questions that are very qualitative in nature, descriptive, that would allow you to have a discussion and a conversation that would help you in that decision. Does that make sense? And that
Yes.
literally answered one of the questions you have, which is, why did you pick these items? Do you understand what I'm saying to you? So when you say, if I were to say I'm going to use multiple choice for, something that's on a Likert scale or something like that, I want to know why you're choosing that item, why you're choosing those item types. You're using a constructed response item type, which is open-ended questions, 4 of them, because the amount of information, amount of reasons that we would get for qualifying would be too much to give in a simple survey. So instead, we're doing something open-ended that will provoke a conversation and for us for deeper thinking. That's what it is. So those questions should be aligned to that. You can say, what are the struggles? Whatever you get at, but that's kind of what you're looking at. Does that make sense?
Yes. And I agree. Like, what are the struggles? So an SST can be triggered because of something academic. It could be reading or math, or
Or
it could be,
science or history or
well,
anything you want, really.
mainly it's reading or math, the
No.
essential, we're looking basically at the essential standards, but also it can be behavior.
Don't say that to an arts teacher, but go on.
Yeah.
You say that if arts are not essential standards, you're going to have someone who's very upset with you. So just be careful when you say
Yeah.
that. They're all essential.
Well,
I'm just saying, just
that's
saying.
not me saying that. That's my district saying
I
that,
get
but
it. I
I
get it.
hear what you're saying.
I get it.
So it can be academic, let's say, or behavioral.
Sure.
So
1000%.
should one of the questions be about behavior? Yeah,
Should
one
be.
could be about
Describe
reading, one could be around,
it doesn't have to be a dichotomous variable. It can be an open-ended one. Describe the problem in 2 sentences or less. Done. And so
okay.
now you can identify what you just said to me. Kids are not reading by 3rd grade. They can't identify I don't know, did you say letter sounds, or they can't read, whatever it is.
They don't
Okay,
know, all their letters or sounds.
boom. That right there is something that has to do with ELA. There's a problem that gears me towards that. That could be something along those lines, whatever it may be.
So
Behavioral, the kid can't sit
that could be
still.
one of the questions.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another thing that we're running into is when they're in 1st grade, there's not as big of a differentiation. In other words, they're saying an SST or testing is usually triggered by there's more than 2 years that the kids are behind. That would maybe
That
indicate
could be
some kind of an assessment.
so here's the thing. So you're talking SST in the sense of saying that it's on the road to testing.
Our
So
admin is highly discouraging that line
I
of
understand that
talking.
too. Trust me,
Yeah.
I understand that very, very well. I came out of
Okay.
special ed years and years ago. I understand. And what they're looking at is, anyway, there's lots of things along those lines. Yes, you can ask that. It's hard for you to say they're more than 2 years behind unless you've got a real clear assessment that's going to tell you what that 2 years is. So if you've got something that measures it, remember we talked about this early on, there are some things that are kind of the norm reference tests that really look to say if a child scores at this level, they are behind by X amount of months, or 1.2 years or whatever like that. Be careful in my really young years, that's a little more valid. As you get older, it gets less and less so just be careful, and you have to make sure that you're using a test that really gives you that type of output, to be able to do that. And it's usually not something that's just one quick test to get that. So just be
So which is
thoughtful
why the
about that.
qualitative type of
Qualitative's a
question.
little easier. Yeah, it's really
Okay.
hard to be able to say there, you know, you can ask a yes or no on that and say, did you give an assessment that shows that? But now you're going to limit it only to ELA, which is one specific area, because it's hard for you to say what is 1 year, what's 2 years behind in math. What does that really
Right.
mean? So it gets to be
Okay.
a little more limiting in what you're talking about.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You got it. Let me say a couple things about this really quickly. Your assessment does not need to be associated with your final program evaluation project. It can be an assessment of anything you want. I don't care what it is. It does not matter. You can you can give an assessment of movie preferences. I don't care. What I want you to do is to think about the aspect of creating an assessment and what goes into creation of items that really get at the construct you're doing. I will say to you, movie preferences might be a little wonky and hard to measure. So instead, I mean, you can do it around the idea of, you know, if you wanted to create an assessment of satisfaction with training that you're doing, that's great. I don't care. I want you to be thoughtful about each item, make a decision of why you're putting those in there and what does the scaling look like. I'm using Likert scale because X. I'm using constructed response because X. I don't care what you use. There is no right or wrong answer to this. What's right or wrong is, did you justify it? That's what I'm interested in. So as you're putting these together, describing the developmental process, all that stuff, I'm interested. I'm not interested in what you're measuring. I'm not interested in that doesn't matter to me. I want you to talk about what it was like to create an assessment and why you made the decisions you made. That's it's that metacognitive work that you're doing around the creation. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, sorry, just confirming, because today we had, it was a coincidence, but we are having an issue in the school in which some kids are having intervention for reading. And the people that are taking over this intervention initiative, they're new to school and they don't really understand why those kids are being pulled out, and the tests, the results, the data that generated those, you know, the criteria for those kids to be there doesn't really match, and it's all a little messy. And we're kind of thinking about, okay, let's redo that somehow, but we don't have time to do something super big, and we need to continue that intervention. Somehow. So our idea in this little group of 4 teachers was to create a very short assessment in which we could redefine which kids could benefit from that program right now before big assessments come out and we have a new. So I could use that, right? So we thought about that, and we can I can offer to do the assessment, to create the assessment and use for this purpose, like in real life.
And you're talking about the scaling you're using, why you're using what you're using, how do you know it's reliable, or has, you know, something that you would do. And again, you don't have to do the reliability or validity measure. You would describe how you would, if you were to do it. How would I ensure that it's reliable? How would I ensure that it's valid? You don't have to do it. Just give me something about how you might do that if you were to use it. Now, if you're really using it, that's your choice, and I would encourage you to use it, but do that. But for this thing, it's simply an exercise in creating assessments. People think it's easy. It's not. Doing it well and doing it right is not as easy as it seems. So I want you to think through this process. That's what you're doing.
Yeah, so, and that's the reason why it has to be simple at this moment, because for until another big assessment comes out and we have like other big data, we need to have something right now. So it's just something to, you know, fill up that gap right now, and just like keep going with the very, very, very low for now. Then we create groups based on bigger data.
Got it. Perfect.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Can you, in the directions, you will identify a construct and define
what's a
it.
construct?
Can you, I'm a little fuzzy on
Somebody
the whole.
help her out. What's a construct? Anybody remember? What's a construct? Anybody? Give me the better way to do it is give me an example of a construct. Anybody? Unmute and just say it.
Test preparation and academic achievement.
Those could be 2 different ones. Test preparation, academic achievement could be one. teacher ability. You could say intelligence is a construct, depression is a construct. Anything that is something that you would have to be able, it's something that you need to define something about. So with what is depression? Depression is a word, but we don't define it by saying you have depression. You define it by you have depression because you sleeping more, you have sadness over a certain period of time, you don't do what you want. That's a construct. When you have this idea of what is intelligence? Intelligence is, we talked about this, intelligence, we can define the different types of intelligence. So if you were to say, looking at this test preparation, how prepared are you for these assessments? What are the test preps? So you can actually take a look at that construct, whatever it may be that you want to be able to use. You can talk about it with satisfaction. You can talk about it with, you can do an assessment of happiness or joy. That's a construct. You are defining it based upon some of the assessment data that you're going to pull in. Make sense?
Would the construct for this, if the assessment I want to create is asking teachers questions so then they know whether or not to recommend a student for an SST and go into the system and fill all of that stuff out.
SST appropriateness.
Okay.
Something like that. Make sense?
Yep. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Speak now or forever hold your peace. All right, great. Okay, so today we are in, man, we're just flying through. Do you guys realize that we have week 13, 14, and 15? So I'm going to tell you something right now, my friends. I am sorry. Next week, I can't have class Thursday night because I have Educator of the Year for the county and I have to be there. And I'm required. So I know everyone is like going, well, I'm so sad that we can't be here. So I'm going to record what it is. I'll put it on. You can watch it, but I cannot be here Thursday night because I absolutely have to be. And I warn Fresno State when they give me a live class. I say there are times I just cannot be here. So sorry about that. But I will be back. You're not sad. Maybe you're sad about that. We have Thanksgiving off, that week of Thanksgiving off, but I'll be back the week after to do one final kind of lecture thing, and we can talk about anything you have around the final and the rest of that. And let me just also tell you, there's no final in this class. Yay for all of you. No one's complaining about that either. No final. Your final is the final project. So the last time we will actually officially meet will be that week 15, which is the week after Thanksgiving. And then the following week, I'm available if you have questions. I'm always available. If you have questions, shoot me an email. I think my cell number is literally in the syllabus. So you can text me if you need to talk, to chat. No big deal. I'm happy to talk when I'm driving or wherever. If I'm going somewhere crazy, just let me know. I'm always happy to chat. So this week we're talking cost analysis. Next week we're going to do experimental and we'll talk about some designs that we talk about with evaluation. And then the last one is just really talking qualitative work. I want to make sure you guys get the idea. We've spent a lot of time on quantitative stuff and we haven't done much with qualitative. So I want to make sure you get an idea of what that is. Sound good? We okay with that? Any other questions before we get moving on? Okie dokie. We're talking about this now. Let's talk cost analysis, which is always very interesting to me. So I just finished doing some work with the Department of Ed on this grant program that we did, which was it was the old I3 and it's now called EIR, and they're for multiple millions of dollars. That a lot of state, the current administration is what it is, has a big interest in sending a lot of the work that we do with grants and the rest back to the states. They want it to go back to the state departments of education, is what it is. So there was a lot of work that was done around this in this grant, but part of the grants that they send, that they actually do, will have quite lengthy evaluations. And so I showed you guys the scoring rubric. It's a certain percentage, and part of the evaluation is always kind of looking at how you're evaluating the cost. And so tonight we're going to show you some ways you can start to think about how do we not only evaluate some type of project program, whatever we're going to be doing, based upon maybe its appropriateness, its effectiveness, its maybe you're taking a look at its impact. It's very, today, today, the Learning Policy Institute, I sat through a presentation by a woman who I'm sure she was an incredibly intelligent individual. I know that I'm getting old now because it looked like she was 14. I just was like, my gosh, this woman is like 10 times smarter than I am. And she literally looks like she should be a ninth grader. But she was presented all on an evaluation that was done by the Learning Policy Institute around the first cohort of community schools. And they talked about the input and the impact and all the rest of those, And it was really, you know what, I'm gonna, how do I get out of this? If I escape out of this for 1 second, I want to show it to you for 2 seconds. I'm trying to show you, the reason I show you these things is I want you to see that what we're talking about in here is not simply me just like babbling. Oh, maybe they didn't include it. Let's see if it's in here. Oh yeah, here we go. We're not doing, I'm not, what you guys are learning about is not simply things that are just, oh, this is interesting, or I'm taking a class. They do this work. They talked about the study results. What is this? They spent $4 billion on community schools, and our work, does it have an impact on students? And so they showed us that it does. They talked about this strategy, how they matched 458 cohort ones with those that are demographically similar. They talk about what those look like. Talk about differences before and after matching. Exactly what we've talked about in these classes. They're looking at specific key findings that they actually found. And so what they did with this program, they looked to be able to see, was chronic absenteeism better as a result of participating in the community schools? And they found that it was. They found here the suspensions went down markedly for those that were in the community schools programs as opposed to those that were not. These are evaluations. This isn't research. They didn't randomly assign. This is an evaluation that they've done. They looked, and I won't show you those because it doesn't matter, but like this is ELA and math scores. Community schools scores went up, whereas those that were not participating in community schools went down. Look at that. ELA, this is ELA over here, and this is math. They found specifically that they were looking at days of learning for grade level equivalency. It's a little complex. If you ask me, this is a little bit of like cooking jambalaya. They're kind of throwing a lot of stuff in there, trying to get a flavor they want. I'm okay with that because it really is, it can be statistically sound. But what they're finding is that Black students who participated in these community schools, because of the fact that they were doing what they were doing in these schools, had an effect size of about a 0.18 standard deviations above it. It accelerated growth. It basically said that they had about 130 days more of instruction. They weren't adding days, but it was the equivalency of getting like 130 days extra math instruction just by participating in these community schools. 151 in ELA. So what we're talking about is you took my tax dollars and you put this into a program. Now there's lots of questions left. This is 1 year's worth of data. I don't know if you noticed this, but this is 1 year. 1 year does not a trend make. Okay, that's a blip. It could be once. If you made investments based upon 1 year, you got problems, but this is the first time that you're doing this. It's very interesting, very informative. This is exactly what we're talking about. This is real life. Linda Darling Hammond runs the Learning Policy Institute. She's our state board chair. This is exactly all the things that we're learning in this class is what they've done in this evaluation. They've put together mathematical comparisons, built matched paired groups. They've done actual assessments, and they've done statistical analysis. And there's a whole bunch of other things that they've taught. We can talk about. But I just want to show you that what we're talking about is real. These are things that are normally happening. This informs our legislature. It forms our new governor coming in to say, should we continue to spend money on this or should we not? They use this research. They use this evaluation to be able to inform the decisions that you're doing in states. This is why you're learning it, because you're dipping your toes in this to say, I have a better understanding. I can interpret some of this stuff. And maybe if I'm interesting, I can learn more and go on in other areas to be able to build. But just making a comment, I wanted to show you. Again, I don't want to get too deep in that, but that's why we're talking about all those. So one of the things that we do is when we look at it, we don't simply just look at, did it have an impact on student learning? Did it have an impact on chronic absenteeism? We say, what was the benefit? Now we spent $4 billion on community schools. Was it the money that made the difference? If I'd have given $4 billion to 435 other schools, now it wasn't $4 billion for 435 schools, but the equivalent amount of money that I gave to those 436 cohort 1 schools, if I'd have just given that money to the other schools and let them do whatever they wanted with it, raise teacher salaries, buy a baseball diamond, give the administrators a raise, have pizza every day for kids, I don't know, whatever they're going to do, would I have seen the same results? Would I have seen chronic absenteeism go down? Would I have seen test scores go up? I don't know. If I just bought $4 billion worth of extra bodies to be on campus, because we know that makes a difference. There are adults on campus that may be showing affection for kids or learning about the kids, and a caring adult makes a big difference in a student's life. Was that what caused it? We don't know yet, but that's what a cost analysis does. Was it worth the amount of money we spent? Could I have done it for $2 billion? Could I have done it? Because guess what? Whose tax dollars is that? You and me. Who paid taxes last year? Me. Paid a lot of taxes. Was my tax dollars used wisely? That's the problem with legislatures today, not just California, but our federal ones that wackadoo make me crazy, is they spend too much money on everything. I'm not talking about politics. I'm talking about people. They are too quick to spend your dollars and not be able to see, does it actually work? That's what cost analysis is for. That's why we're going to look at this today. And there's ways to be able to do it. The studies that we did that I was talking about, the EIR program, specifically did this kind of stuff that we're going to talk about today. They called out elements in these grants that were part of the evaluations that said, we plan to evaluate costs like this. Okay. So cost matters. Okay. Education resources are finite. My money's finite. We have to know, do I get value for my money? If I do this, is it worth the amount of money that I'm putting it in? Helps decision makers, literally, just like what we were talking about. And it's very integral to what we're doing with things like ESSA, Title I, all the rest of these. You guys know a little bit about LCFF and LCAP and the rest of that stuff. Makes a huge difference to be able to see this. Go ahead.
I was just thinking like curiosity, because I've been thinking a lot about that when I did my study, and I looked at PISA again. I think I mentioned that here at PISA results. Yeah, and the U.S. is among the countries that spend the more and harvest very little from what it spends in education in comparison to other countries, at least considering the PISA survey.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I was thinking about that, the how often all these all the programs and all the money that has been invested since, like, for at least 25 years, since No Child Left Behind, or all these years, how much of this is actually evaluated? Like, I mean, is like the government gets back to it and see, okay, this money was used effectively, or how much of it is actually, for example, canceled when they see it's not working? Is it like, how often does it get canceled, or how, and what is the process of getting this, like, accountability? That's what I'm.
Well, that's a good question. It's a difficult question because of the political nature of what we spend money on in schools. Let me ask you this. I have teachers in the room, right? So you can unmute as I answer this question. Do you want smaller class sizes? Who unmute yourself if you do not want smaller class size? If you think a smaller class size makes a difference in your class, yes or no? Anyone say no, it doesn't really make much of a difference? If I were to say to you that at a point, class size matters, but at another point, if you go in the opposite direction and you make classes really small, does student achievement across the board go up? It doesn't. And I can show you in Tennessee, they spent a ton of money. I think it was in the 80s. They spent a lot of money. And they said, we are going to now go to a ratio of a certain number of students per teacher. And guess what happened? Test scores went down. Why? Why? Anybody know? What would you think? Think about it. What happens when I make class sizes smaller?
I think like the context changes, like you said, that's super important. So obviously for the students, that changed completely if it just went to a way
Okay.
smaller class size.
Context matters. That's true. This is my favorite game to play. Guess what's on the teacher's mind? I love this game, and we all love to play it as teachers. I'll give you the hint. I'll tell you. Let me give you a little hint. So if I made class sizes smaller, let's say I went from 35 kids or 30 kids in a classroom to 25 kids in a classroom. What happened to those 5 kids that I kicked out of your class? Did I take them and send them home? What did I do with them? What did I do with those 5 kids? If there's 30 teachers on a campus and I reduce every single one of those teachers by 30 kids, that's 30 times 5. What is that? 3 times 15, 150 kids? Where do those 150 kids go? They go into other classes, right? Well, who's teaching those other classes? Other teachers. Well, where were those other teachers? Were they hiding in the bushes waiting for you to find them? No. They went out and found less qualified teachers to come in and teach those 150 kids. Now I got teachers who are not as good as the other teachers teaching these kids. And what happens to these kids? Their scores went down. But politically, is it okay for me to say, Maricela, you're an amazing teacher. I'm going to give you 3 more kids because you're such a good teacher. These kids are going to go better. Now you're going to have 36 kids in your class. And you're going to go, oh, hell no, I'm not doing that. My union's going to come in here. And let me just tell you what's going to, you know what I'm saying? I mean, like, seriously. And politically, as a superintendent, I'm going to get skewered for that. But if I pull 5 kids out, or if I pull 10 kids out, and I get this teacher that get fired from another district, because guess what? They got a credential and they're breathing like, oh, they got a pulse. Okay, put them in a classroom. That politically makes me look great. I put more teachers in there. I put more kids. Hey, my class sizes are down. Woo! The teacher can't teach worth crap. Now the kids are doing bad. So what I want you to understand is that there are times when politically it becomes very difficult to say, I'm going to make this decision and I'm going to make it better. We have to look at it. And then it becomes politically unpopular. So it's Tennessee who did this. They reduced the number of them. And it just didn't have the effect that we thought. And so they ended up moving them back up. Now, I'm not saying more kids in a class make things better. That's not what I'm saying. Is I'm saying a simple change may have ramifications that move out from it that we're not prepared and understand are going to happen. And so that's why we do some of this work to kind of begin to think. And then you have to have the political will. Oh, dang it. I raised my hand again. You have to have the political will and all the rest of that stuff to be able to know how to change it. And our legislature and districts as a whole often are not quick enough to be able to do that. So it doesn't work very well. So yes, we do them, but how we respond to them might be challenging. Go ahead.
Yeah, I see that because it makes a lot of sense. And I always think a lot about that. And this class actually has been very useful for a bunch of things that are happening in my real life, in my context right now. So I am having a very challenging group, for example, like just bringing it to my context. And there's a lot of attempts to help, but I'm in the middle of it. And I can see that from the 10 ideas that come out, maybe 2 or 3 are really helpful or are really making a difference. So it doesn't matter if you get 1 more person, but is this person qualified? Well, there's a problem. If you are bringing another aide to teach math, but the only time that this teacher can come and pull out the kids is the moment where I need these kids in the class at that moment. They are losing important things, so I'm gaining here. So it's always a trade-off. It has to do with the cost analysis at the sense. And
Correct.
I see that. And yesterday I just heard about a shortage of teachers in Canada. I'm not sure where. I think Ontario. I don't know. They were doing something like that. Political, like the government was announcing a lot of measures to attract teachers, more teachers, because they were teachers. They were not teachers enough because they were quitting. So they quit. And then they were trying to attract new teachers by reducing the time of the training from 2 years to 1 year. But that's not the problem, because these teachers are going to go to the classroom and they're going to face the same problems, and even worse, because those teachers that are quitting are the ones that are getting sick, are the experienced ones many times, and they have all the experience. And if they are getting sick, imagine the new ones. So these guys are getting all this money and funds to put more teachers in the field, right? That are going to quit in 1-2 years, and all this money goes away. So politically, yeah, I totally get it, and it drives me crazy too, because all of these things that we see. Another example, back 20 years ago when I started my career in Brazil, there was a new party that came in, and the first page in the news was, okay, our budget, Brazilian budget for education is going to go from 3% of the GDP to 4% of the GDP, and everybody went, whoo! But I was working in the public education, and I saw that the money that we received and all the funds we received were not little. They were spent badly. So putting more money in there does not necessarily mean it's going to be a good thing, because we were not doing a good job with the money we already had. We were wasting that money, and they're putting more money. So everybody was very happy, and that it was the only person that was like questioning this. In which ways is it good? Not necessarily. Like, where's this money coming from? Why do we have all these TVs here in the box that never have been used? So I don't understand it.
Yep. So that's what we're going to learn about. If you want to fix the teacher crisis, Dylan Williams said it best. He calls it the love the one you're with model. So if anyone ever listens to that song, go back and listen to it. And it really is about professional learning and supporting and developing the folks that you have. Trying to find new ones is a lot harder, more expensive, and usually they're not that great. So just saying. All right, so let's look at a couple of cost studies. There's really only 3 that we talk about in here as far as how we look at them, and I'll just take you through a couple of examples and talk about these. There's a cost benefit analysis, and that really basically says, do the benefits outweigh the costs? So if I spend this money, what I get back does it outweigh these costs? Okay, so it's truly monetary. Dual enrollment versus AP access cost savings. Dual enrollment is a great program. What does it cost? What are the benefits? Does it outweigh the others? AP access, that right there is a huge battle that we can talk about. I have issues with some of both, but that's a huge battle right now out there. Not a battle, but there's AP tests are pushed really hard by the AP testing company because they make a lot of money from it. And dual enrollment is great in certain ways if it's done well. But if you've got a kid who's not prepared and takes a dual enrollment class in 11th grade and now has a D on their transcript for the rest of their life in college, that's problematic as well. How do you prepare? How do you track? All these things. So what is the cost of that? What are those benefits? So you look at it in monetary costs. Another one is cost effectiveness. Basically, if you're saying which option yields a better outcomes per dollar. So if I spend this amount of money, do I get this? Do I spend that amount of money? Do I get that? And so it's really looking at outcome units for the amount of money that I have per outcome unit that you're looking. And then cost utility, what's the perceived value? This is a little more nuanced, and you're going to say you may look at costs in different ways. So we'll look at that as we go along. Teacher PD satisfaction versus performance gain. Basically, am I saying more teachers who are more satisfied? Do I get a performance gain from students' work? So if I have a really fantastic professional learning environment and I'm working with these people, do I see gains in student performance? And is it worth that amount of time and money and effort that I'm doing? Okay, so keep those. There's 3 different types that you'll see as you go in and look at these. Tons of work out there, so you can see as you're looking at it. Let me give you a couple of quick examples, real quick examples that looked at this. So high dosage tutoring is the thing right now. If anyone doesn't know that, this is the thing in the federal government all over the place. Basically, if we want to fix education, get them tutors. Anyway, and I'm not kidding with you. Like literally, this is the thing. So what they wanted to look at is they wanted to see kind of what is the cost and how effective is it. And what they found, by and large, it costs about $3,000 per student per year to have a really good, if it's going to have some type of impact. So about 3.5 standard deviations of reading gains if you've got some really good tunings. But what we found is that if you don't spend that, if you get cheaper tutors or lower quality tutors, that improvement goes down a lot lower. Okay, so what we found is that it really is something that you spend a little more money, you get higher quality tutoring and tutoring intensity, you'll see a better gain, just going to cost you more. So being thrifty may not be the best choice if you're looking purely at tutoring. That's one of the things that tutoring is literally probably the thing I hear the most of what you spend money if you're trying to catch kids up. And there's a ton of research done. I mean, this one right here was just done in 23. A lot of that kind of stuff. Another one that this one-to-one device programs that were actually used, it was also kind of used in tutoring programs per se. But what we found is that this is also another one that if you cheap out and don't get good stuff with these kids and how they're actually using it, and then intensely and tie it into the work that you're doing, you still don't see the gains. But if you do it, you give these kids devices and then have programs that actually work in the devices, you'll see that there is actually, they can have cascades. This was done in 2020. Now, the funny thing is there's a lot of research right now. Jonathan Haidt, who's the guy who did a whole bunch of research on screens. You guys ever heard of Jonathan Haidt? Jonathan Haidt is his name. I think it's Haidt. He's done a lot of research on these cell phones. And if you have kids, teenagers, don't give your kids cell phones before they're 16, just so you know. He's done a lot of research on that. There's a lot of that. But he talks about the lack of impact that technology is having on students, which is interesting in AI as rest. But this is one of these other areas. How much does it cost? How much should you spend? How much is it, the investment that you put in, $450 plus the $80 that you're going to cost over time? Does it actually have an impact? Classic example of that. This is a really interesting one. This is probably the most interesting study found in 2015, used like crazy over and over. This is truly a seminal kind of, this is one of those touchstone actual studies. They found that when you spend money on SEL, this study, and they did a huge meta-analysis on this, that it is an 11-to-1 impact long-term. Do you guys know what ROA? Return on investment. What that means is for every dollar you spend on SEL in the school, you get back $11 over time for every dollar on reduced suspension, on dropout, on all these. Now, they factor the cost in. It's very interesting, and it was controversial. And I dug a little bit on this one to be able to see, have there been other studies that have refuted it? And they haven't. They're finding that this pretty much, it bears out that the investment we put into making sure that we focus in on social emotional learning in our curriculum, and if taking it again, implementation matters, fidelity matters, how much you implement it actually has a huge return on your investment. That really does make a difference. So again, what are we doing with it and why do we look at it? This is why we do these types of studies, because we as consumers of this literature, consumers of this content, consumers of these programs need to be able to say, is that worth, because it's a trade-off, right, guys? Remember, SEL, if I do one thing, I can't do something else. So that's one thing that I do darn well better be worth what I'm not doing because I've done this. So SEL is one. And I don't know a ton about SEL. I know enough about just to get me in trouble, but it's just a really interesting article. If you're interested and want to look it up, go ahead. You unmuted. I'm assuming you want to say something. Anybody? No? Okay. Questions. All right. So here's a couple of things you need to look at, and we're going to talk about other concepts. There's direct costs. Just keep this in mind. This is what you pay for things specifically. How much a teacher cost you? How much materials and curriculum cost you? How much do these tech licenses? Indirect costs are things that you're still paying for, but they may not be specifically to address. Say, if I'm trying to say I want to focus in on teaching ELA in a school, I have to have an ELA teacher. I have to buy a curriculum that's going to focus on ELA, and then I have to buy tech licenses to be able to provide the support these kids need. Well, admin support is going to be the secretary that's supporting these teachers and keeping track of the tech licenses and making sure that we do it. I have to have air conditioner on. I have to have electricity in the room. I have to have the buildings, facilities, all that stuff. That's indirect costs. And indirect costs, there is a calculation. If you go onto the CDE website, you type in indirect cost calculations, you can download a spreadsheet that changes from year to year that tells you what you as a school district can charge a grant for indirect costs. And those indirect costs are exactly that. It's all the things that keep the lights on in your program. It's kind of what it is. There's opportunity costs, which we talked just a little bit about. What I'm doing, what I could be doing. What I'm doing, what I could be doing. And those are real costs. Remember that. There is only so many instructional minutes in a day. What do I choose to use those instructional minutes for? And when I use that, I'm not doing something else when I'm doing something. Now, there has to be that is a really important concept to think about as an administrator who's looking at how much time we have to spend. If you're going to go in and be a curriculum administrator in your district and you're going to ask your teachers, I want you to teach this, remember that with every this, it's not this. And what is that balance? And my hand's up again. What is that balance? So as you're looking at this idea, you have to make a decision. What are those? How are we investing those minutes? Opportunity cost. And then shadow pricing, estimated value of volunteer time, donated space, things that don't have hard cost to it, that won't technically, but require you to have some of these kind of shadow things that are coming in and the rest. These are concepts that you're going to be very aware of as you're reading or thinking about evaluating costs. Make sense? Any questions on that before we go on? No? Okay. So let's do a cost analysis. And I'm going to show you a couple of different things. You define the program and comparison condition. Classic. We've done this with every single thing in research. You did it in 220. You did all the rest. What's your program? What do you want to look at? Identify your perspective. Are we looking at districts? Are we looking at a COE cost? Are we looking at, does it apply to the district? What is the district paying for it? What is the county paying? What is society paying for it? Do you guys understand that? I want you to think about that concept for a minute. When we start to say that SEL has an 11-to-1 payback or return on investment, that's not just saying for you as a district, that's possibly for me as a business owner. When I take this time and teach these kids how to behave and work and play well together and be able to handle emotions and handle other stuff, does that pay for me as an employer? I want you to think about it. I don't know if I have any administrators in here or current administrators right now, but what do? I went from dealing with fussy kids, I deal with fussy adults now. And if you as a teacher had taught my kids or my employees when they were kids how to play with each other and talk and communicate and handle conflict and deal with disappointment. Now, yeah, my parents are supposed to be doing that. That's what their job is. But if parents are not doing it, do I do that in the schools? And what does that pay me forward as a business owner? Because I don't have to deal with it. If I'm spending all my days dealing with fights amongst John and Joe because they're fighting all the time, I don't have time to do my business. Instead, I'm dealing with them in dynamics that they have. Do you see what I'm saying when we talk about societal costs? That's what societal costs are, okay? Where am I looking for? Time horizons and discount future costs. Don't worry about, if you start getting into discount, we're going to start talking about, we'll get way too finance for you. But where do I want to look? Do I want to just say for the course of the year, for the course of the month, for the course of their whole in school time? Is you're going to look at it. And then you're going to actually collect cost data using the ingredients methods. We'll talk about that in a minute. We'll link cost to the measurable outcome. So that can be a little tricky, but you can say, how much does this cost? How much does this thing actually go? Think about that. And then report cost metrics. Is it cost per unit gained? Is it cost per unit of student? Is it return on investment? Things along those lines. Okay. So keep those. This is how we're going to go look at these. And we'll look at each one of these pieces for a little bit. So the ingredients method, it's funny that, again, that we're talking about this week. I was telling some of the folks that I was doing the grant reviews with, every single one of the grant reviews that we did, the evaluator who was doing the evaluation reviews, they use this ingredient method in the real grants they did. Again, I want you to know, I'm not teaching things that are like hypothetical and, oh, this is interesting. This is how it's done. This is how it's done. The ingredients method is they go through a cost analysis and say, here's all the things that I have in my categories, and here's what I'm going to be using in each one of those categories. Personnel, who are my teachers? Facilities, where is it going to be? How is this being paid for? Is it donated? Is it free? Is it something I have to pay for? Equipment, do I have to get laptops? Do I have to actually have chairs? Do I have to be able to buy licenses? What does all this equipment look like? What are the materials that I have? Equipment are going to be things like computers or things. Materials would probably be more along the lines of curriculum, things that I'm going to actually use there. Do I have to provide training? That costs. I have to bring in trainers to be able to do all this stuff. And then anything else that do I have to provide meals? Federal government, you're never paying for meals out of grants, so just get it off your books. You're never going to do that. Transportation, do I got to get people around? All these are real costs. Have I thought about all of these things, salaries and all the rest? So as you're kind of looking at this, it's a framework for making sure that we have really costed out an educational intervention. I love this definition as you do it. It's the true and economic cost of a program. It is more than just saying it costs, whatever you're going to do. What is your time in there? Again, if I'm spending 1 day of your time, what do you cost for a day to be in my program being taught? I've often said as I'm presenting, I'll look out at a room of 500 administrators and I'll say you are an expensive room, because one administrator's day times 500 is a lot of my tax dollars. I better be dang good, because if I'm wasting your time, that's a lot of money wasted. Okay, what is this? As you put this together, you'll go through and think about each one of these ingredients that you're going to put into it to be able to talk about it. And it's not just a budget to be able to say, I got to pay for food. It's all of the costs that are associated with this. And what's that going to take? That's this ingredients method. So you're going to if you're going to get this program components, you're going to have to really get it into functional parts. What does the tutoring cost me? What is the PD? What is the technology integration? Each one of those pieces, each one of them has a specific cost. You would work with your budget office to be able to say, how do I actually factor in the cost of transportation, the bus driver, the actual gas that they're using, or the mileage, whatever unit you're going to be able to use? Okay, there's a couple of examples. Literacy intervention includes teacher PD, small group instruction, student digital access. Each one of those things are cost. Now you don't have to pay for the kids because kids are there. This is cost. Okay. Here are some examples of some of these ingredients, just so you can kind of see how you do it. So personnel, salary times, this thing's covering it up. Devoted to program, including your benefits. Whenever I present, they'll ask me for specific elements of my person. We have to make sure all those benefits are calculated in. All that counts. You may actually pull in market rental value for your facilities if you have to rent a place. If you're going to look at equipment, you may have capital cost divided over 3 or 5 years. So if you buy a computer that costs $1,000, it's going to depreciate over 3 years, because at the end of the time, my folks, by the time we end up with our warranty, I have to replace this computer. So that's taken over the cost of 3 years. Consumables, teacher time spent. So training and PD. So this could be some of the things that I'm paying for the trainer. Plus I have to have substitutes to cover classes. Plus I have to have the materials that we're going to do in it. You see that this begins to be more expensive than you think. Student time, you can look at that as well. Administrative support, any overhead that you put in there. So I'm throwing out a lot of concepts here. Any thoughts, questions? This is how you do these. This is how you put it together to kind of think about what a cost analysis is. Okay, let's get some examples here. So we talked a little bit about monetary values, these shadow prices that you're gonna look at. There may be no direct cost, but you still should consider some of these things that may not be true hard money that you're paying out for some of these things. Okay, so a lot of the other thing is that we want to have a base here. This is getting complex, and I don't want to spend too much time getting too technical with you. But remember that inflation matters. Something that costs something in 2000 costs very different in 2025. So as you're taking a look at it, you may want to be able to do an accurate comparison. You want to make sure that you factor in for inflation. And there's ways to do that with the federal government to give you an inflationary rate to be able to see what it actually would be different. And then when you're looking at it, you can look at it and factor all these pieces out in an annual cost per participant. So, or a cost per outcome unit. Okay, so remember, if you're looking at it from the district, what has the teacher done, or is it per school, but whatever it looks at. Okay, so years ago, I just actually haven't thought about this for a while, but my dissertation was looking at response cost. And so we were looking at, back in the day when we were still learning about online surveys, they were looking to see what is the cost of a physical survey as opposed to an online survey. What is the cost benefit of doing something online as opposed to doing a physical cost. And we factored that in and costed it out, looked at all the pieces from the preparation to the mailing to the stamps, blah, 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 to this, whatever you're going to pay for these other surveys. And it was considerably different. And then we not only looked at their cost, but we looked at it for response rate. How did people respond if you're going to be doing what that cost was? So you can do that for us. Our actual outcome unit was a response to a survey. How much did it cost me to get a single response to a survey? So if it cost me this much to do an online survey and I got this many survey responses, was that cost worth it? Or do I get more by sending people mail? Nowadays, it's totally different. But back in 2005, when I was doing this, I know I'm old, whatever, 2005, it mattered because it was different. So you're looking at those different types of units. Very, very classic way to kind of think about some of those. Put the ingredients together, figure out the total program cost, divide by the number of students served if you have it, you got a cost per student. But you got to make sure that these ingredients that you have up here, these ingredients cost, that you've really thought it through. You've looked at it in real-time value, take a look at that and put it in, and you can actually draw it. Now, here's the trickier part, which is what some of the others will do. Now you may actually look at it to be able to do some measured outcomes. So you could basically say these kids participated in this and they are a certain amount better. One standard deviation, which is standard deviation, is really kind of looking at these effect sizes that you have. And if you were to say, if we did this, we did tutoring, say, for a year with this group of kids, and this group of kids as compared to the other group of kids was 2 standard deviations better on their outcome measure. So at the beginning of the year, we did a pre-test. 1,000 kids went without tutoring, 1,000 kids went with tutoring. At the end of the year, I gave a post-test. The kids who had the tutoring scored 2 standard deviations or 0.3 or 0.5 standard deviations better than the kids who didn't get the tutoring. Now what we can say is cost per 0.1 standard deviation gain. It's a different cost. Does that make sense? So it's now you're looking to say, if I invested this much, because tutoring costs money. And so that's where you're looking at. You can look at it to be able to say, yes, kids grew, but this is how much money I had to put into it. And is it worth that amount of money for it? Okay. So anyway, so again, why do we do it? Well, I heard it said earlier today, accountability. It's my tax dollars. I hate paying taxes. The end of the year, it just makes me nuts to see I'm spending money on stupid things that are good. When they did that COVID the thing that the federal government passed and they spent $1 trillion, there were senators that were paying for horse racing facilities in their states that were paying out of my tax dollars. Don't get me started. Fires me up. I don't mind paying taxes for things that are going to be worthwhile. So I want to be transparent. Show me what you're spending the money on and show me the effect that it actually has. That's why we do this. You as an educator, and the other thing is this, I'm talking big picture. We're talking legislator. Maybe let's talk about it at a school district. I want to go in and I want to say, hey, tutoring works. So I spend a year and I invest some money in tutoring and I get the results at the end. Now I can go before my school board and say, why did I spend this time and is it worth it? Here's a cost analysis, and people understand money. They may not understand some of the research stuff when you start talking standard deviation units and all the rest of the fluffy things around there. But when you're talking dollars and cents to a school board or to a superintendent, they get that. Hey, when you invest this amount of money, look at the effects you get. People go, okay, I can see that. It's transparent. You don't have to have a ton of fiscal data. You can model it. It doesn't have to become straight off that. It really can help you go across programs. You don't have to have the same. A lot of times with test scores and the rest, you kind of have to stay in the same program to be able to stay in that same lane to do comparisons. But with cost, everything, money is the same across. It doesn't make a difference. Easy to be able to be done. And IES and do you guys know what the What Works Clearinghouse is? Anyone ever heard of that? You guys ever heard of What Works Clearinghouse? What Works Clearing? Oh gosh, I can't be political. I have to be careful. What Works Clearinghouse was something that the federal government did many years ago to be able to really talk about educational research that had an effect, and they have very stringent requirements for you to be able to be included in the What Works Clearinghouse. So you have to do your research with this, a specific type of study that's random controlled, to have it without, and it's the gold standard of educational research. And when it's in there, you can then go back and reference that to be able to say, I think we should do this based upon some of the research that I'm finding in the What Works Clearinghouse. Unfortunately, I think they closed down the What Works Clearinghouse with our, I'm gonna be good. So but that's what that is. So What Works Clearinghouse is really stringent research requirements that shows we've done this type of research. And because we've done this type of research, we can justify using this type of program because it's been shown. That's what research is done. IES is the educational. They're the ones who do educational measurement at the federal level as well. Very stringent standards. It's what's recommended. So we do cost analysis for that. Super important. I'm not, again, this is just a quick example. So if you got 2 reading interventions, phonics-based one, balanced literacy, and these are made up, just so you know. If it costs $500 per student on a phonics-based one, I get an effect size of 0.4. Cost 1 standard deviation is a little bit cheaper, right? If I have a little less money to spend, I'm still going to get an effect, but I'm not going to get, but if I got a little more, and instead this balanced literacy, I use 900, I get a little better effect size, cost me a little more, but I'm going to get a little more bang for my buck. So if I'm looking for this specific student group to be able to do it, I'm going to use B. But if I just don't have the money, this is how much it costs me. I'm still going to get effects, but I'm not going to get as much as I'm going to get. Now you as the smart person and the board member and whoever that's in charge of this has to make a decision. Is that 0.2 standard deviations worth the extra money that I'm going to actually have to put in? Is it worth it? And that's a decision that's where you can now you're making an informed decision. It's not simply saying, I think this is better. This is what it cost me. This is what I get. This is why we do it. So it matters. This is very classic what we're doing. It's not going to say, do this when it's better. It's going to say, this is how much what better costs, and it allows us to be better informed. Okay. Here's a couple challenges really quickly. Sometimes when we're getting some of these non-monetary outcomes, it can be hard to monetize that. How do you monetize belonging? It's hard to do that. I don't know, SEL, they did it, but it's hard. Okay, motivation. Sometimes it's hard to get good, clean data across LEAs if that's what you're comparing. Data quality, data availability is always a challenge. Data governance as you're looking at it. And then this idea, again, we just talked a little bit about politicizing some of the monetizing student outcomes, even in the sense of what we talked about, shrinking the class sizes. The political will may not be there to change that. And the union will may not. I don't want bigger class sizes either. Efficiency versus fairness is some of our equity trade-offs. As soon as you start monetizing things, you're now getting down to what is the cost of a kid. That's a little scary. So be careful kind of what you're looking at that. But it is a matter, it can be there. Here's a couple, these are a couple articles that I put in there that you can look up that are very current. ELOP cost modeling for the expanded learning things. WestEd does a ton of cost analyses. Pretty useful for you to look at if you're interested in those. Cost analysis is useful. Cost analysis is meaningful and makes sense to most of us. And it's complex, but it doesn't have to be crazy complex. But it can have an impact. So that is content for tonight. Man, look at how efficient we were tonight. 8 o'clock. What questions do you have for me on costs and the rest? Now, I'll get assignment stuff and other tangential things. Let's get at the end. What do you have questions about what we just talked about right now? If you don't have any, I'm done. We call it a night. We meet again in 2 weeks. No, 3 weeks. Well, look at that. You get a break from me. All right. What questions do you have for me? Gonna leave me sitting alone in my sad, pathetic hotel room in a rainy Folsom. That's okay. I've sat in lots of hotel rooms. I was in Ontario last night. Now, where was I? Was I in Ontario? No, I was in Riverside. Everybody wants to go to Riverside. I was down in Riverside last night in a hotel room.
So
okay, go ahead.
We have one more Zoom meeting on December, is it
Yeah,
the
what's the date?
4th? December 4th,
Let's look.
right?
Next week I can't meet because I have Educator of the Year. You should come out. I have to be
Then
a
it's-
thing.
and then it's Thanksgiving.
So we're off. I'm not going to have you meet with me on Thanksgiving. You can
Thank
if you
you.
want. Then we have a meeting on the 4th, and I will make myself available on the 11th if you need me.
Got it. Okay, thank
Yeah, so
you.
I'm not gonna have, we're not gonna have a lecture or anything on the 11th, but I'm there if you want me. Okay, if you don't have questions, we'll call it good. If you have questions, I'm here for you.
I have questions on. I'm
ahead.
not forever holding my peace. I know you said that, but I got booted off, so I apologize.
Oh, no,
So
you're fine. You're
when
fine.
this when this